So we have Ron joining us again. This is the second event that Ron has been open to collaborating with us on. He is based in Fort Collins, and he is a wealth of knowledge in architectural history and preservation. We did a Fort Collins walking tour with him earlier this year, and we hope to do that one again later this year as well. But in talking to him, he had also mentioned that he recently completed this past May a historic context for City of Fort Collins about William Robb's architecture, who was a local architect who practiced here at Fort Collins. And so he offered to give a presentation overview of his findings, which we're excited to learn more about professionally. Ron has his own company, Takata Historical Associates, which recently completed this historic context, which studied William Robb's architectural career for the city of Fort Collins. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, Bill Robb and his firm were responsible for the design of numerous buildings, structures, and planned development projects that serve the Fort Collins community. Many of these, including churches, schools, government, and commercial buildings, gained prominence in the city because of their architecture and notable uses. Many of his buildings still stand, and his architecture firm evolved into RB&B Architects, which is still practicing today and serving the Colorado community. We did actually invite their firm to join us. I don't know if anyone was able to. I don't see any names that may be from there, but we did loop them in.
Actually, Corky Bradley is from Airbnb, former
Oh,
principal.
well, there we go. Corky, so
Yeah.
just spoke up. We're happy to have you. Um, and so a little bit about Ron. He is a Colorado native whose family has been here since the 1890s. He is the founder and president of Tatanka Historical Associates Inc, a historical research, site documentation, and preservation consulting firm. With a graduate degree in American social and cultural history from the University of Colorado, he has over 3 decades of experience in historical research, writing, field analysis, consultation, and education. He founded his Historical Associates Group in 1992, leveraging his experience in Western American history, architectural history, and historic preservation. He also served as the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission in Fort Collins for 5 years. And beyond his professional work, he's actively involved in historic preservation, serving on various boards and commissions, including the Colorado Endangered Places Committee and the State Historic Preservation Review Board. He is also a co-founder and president of Historic Larimer County, demonstrating his commitment to the preservation, education, and advocacy. So, Ron, take it away.
Okay. So yeah, George Braley is also a former principal with Airbnb Architects. So we have two people here. I'm very
Awesome.
happy to see that from the firm that was started by Bill Robb back in the 1950s. So welcome everybody. And thanks to all you intrepid people who decided to go out on a freezing cold night and be there in person. This project, this presentation, I should say, emerged from a historic context that I was hired to produce for the city of Fort Collins, their preservation planning office, just a few years ago. The work was largely done during the pandemic and focused on coming up with a historic context for the impact that Bill Robb and his firm had upon the city of Fort Collins and continues to have today in the way of their architectural design and the many, many buildings that have stood and are still standing across the entire community. I always tell people that you cannot drive anywhere in Fort Collins without passing or going into a building that was designed by this firm. They were absolutely prolific from the very beginning and have a very interesting history. I also want to point out that there are some very interesting buildings that were designed by Bill Robb and his colleagues in his firm over the years, but they are very practical buildings also. These were not, not that these weren't practical in their own way, but these were not the kind of buildings that were put up by Charles Deaton in Denver or Charles Hartling or Titian Papachristou in Boulder. These fantastical buildings that are such landmarks today, visual landmarks, as well as on the National Register or whatever, local registers. These are very practical buildings that had their own beauty, their own utilitarian character, and we'll see some really beautiful buildings along the way, as well as some that were just planned to be very functional. So let me start out by telling you a little bit about Bill Robb, his background. He was born in 1922 in Pueblo, the son of Colorado natives Edgar and Frances Robb. Bill Robb's father, Edgar, was employed as a clerk at the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company plant, what we often refer to as CF&I. But in the 1920s, the family moved to Durango, where Edgar became a district manager for the Continental Oil Company. So Bill grew up in Durango. He graduated from Durango High School in 1940. Graduating from high school at a time like that meant that you were likely to end up serving in World War II. Robb did register for the draft in 1942 and was inducted into the U.S. Army Air Force in April of 1944. He was trained as a pilot in B-26 Marauder aircraft. So he was ended up flying 33 bombing missions over Germany and France during the war. For those of you who are familiar with it, you might understand what 33 bombing missions means, but that's an excessive number of bombing missions in terms of what was required. But more importantly, most people didn't survive anywhere near 33 bombing missions. They were, by that point, they were usually shot down and either deceased or in German POW camps. So that's a remarkable thing that he was not shot down during that time and survived that many missions. Following his discharge from military service in early 1946, he returned to Durango and married his high school sweetheart, Eleanor Hogan. They were married in the town's historic St. Columba Catholic Church. Over the following years, they had 6 children together. After their wedding, the Robbs moved to Boulder, where he enrolled in the University of Colorado. In 1947, he completed a bachelor's degree in architectural engineering, and the following year, a graduate degree in structural engineering. He then attended MIT in Boston, where in 1951 he received a bachelor's degree in architecture. So I want to talk about a little bit. These are some early pictures of him, obviously from World War II on the left and in the middle, and then graduating from college on the right. Are you able to see the slides fine, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So what brought him to Fort Collins? That's the first question. Um, After he finished his degree at MIT, the Robbs returned to Colorado and he secured a job in Boulder with an architect by the name of Robert Ditson. Has anybody heard of Robert Ditson?
Alan has.
Oh, we have one person that's heard of him. Okay. Not much is known about him, and at some point, somebody needs to look a little more deeply into his career. But during the 1950s, Ditson worked on a number of government, commercial, school, and church projects across eastern Colorado. One of those projects involved a new building in Fort Collins that he designed that was constructed at 514 South College Avenue. That's just south of Mulberry Street. It's the building on the left that says Big City Burrito today. It's again a very utilitarian building, but Ditson designed that building to house the offices of the Fort Collins Conservation District, Larimer County Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Commission, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Soil Conservation Service. So even though it was a modest-sized building and very plain looking, it served an important role in the community because this was the period of time when state and federal agencies were starting to settle in Fort Collins that were involved in agriculture and the environment, and the community still to this day is a center of that kind of activity because of the association with Colorado State University, which was, of course, the big agricultural school in the state. Um, Ditson noticed that there were no architects at the time that were operating in Fort Collins, and he decided to open a branch office in the city. So he placed his office in that building uh, on the right side of the building under what's the name Burrito. That's where his office actually was. But he needed somebody to manage the office because he was working out of his office in Boulder. So he hired Bill Robb and put him in charge of the Fort Collins office. Um, and then you see the advertisement for when they opened that office in the early 1950s. The city's population was, of course, growing like crazy at that time, starting to grow like crazy because of the economic boom that was going on across the nation and in Colorado. There were a lot of housing subdivisions that were being prepared, commercial centers that were starting to spring up, particularly to the south and west of town. The existing office buildings, retail stores, churches, and municipal buildings were just absolutely bursting at the seams. Um, so the demand was rising for both remodels and new construction in the city. As the only architect in town who was actually based in Fort Collins, Bill Robb began to attract clients who were interested in hiring somebody local rather than going to Denver or Boulder for an architect for design assistance. Rob worked for Ditson for 2 years, prepared plans for a number of projects. These are a couple of early conceptual plans for a new city hall and for an expansion of the Larimer County Hospital, which became Poudre Valley Hospital, which is now UC Health on the east side of town. Um, and then he also designed a remodel of a couple of 1920s buildings on College Avenue, just north of Old Town, into a new facade for Markley Motors. These were very bland looking service garage buildings, and he, as you can see on the upper left, turned it into something that was much more eye catching. It's really unfortunate that all that signage is no longer here. Today, the building looks like what you see on the lower right. He was also involved in a number of other projects during that time as the managing architect for Ditson's office in Fort Collins. This is just a short list of some of those buildings. There's a lot of research that still needs to be done to find out how many of these buildings and others that I'm going to show you a couple of other lists like this coming up. These are just excerpts from a much lengthier list of the firm's projects, and somebody down the road is going to probably want to take these and see if they can find more buildings that are still standing today. Um, Before we looked at some more of his projects, I want to just briefly review the evolution of the firm. In 1953, Robb left Ditson's office and launched his own solo architectural practice. He placed his first advertisement in the Colorado newspaper in January of 1954. That's the ad that you see on the right. And announced that he was moving into the Colorado building upstairs in the Colorado. The Colorado building it was and still is a prominent building downtown. That was some prime real estate to put an office into, and that was mostly attorneys and a few doctors' offices that were upstairs. And he was lucky to secure space in that building. Um, of course, he was just starting out, had no idea what kind of impact yet that he was going to have upon the city and its evolution. Uh, in 1956, he moved out of the Colorado building and into a suite of offices on the second floor of the Robertson building, which is still standing on the left there. That's at northeast corner of College and Oak, if you know the downtown area. He was joined there by his first employee, a slightly younger architect by the name of Virgil Magerfleisch. I love that name. Who worked as Robb's chief draftsman and project coordinator. I always jokingly say, who would take a brand new little baby and give them the name Virgil Magerfleisch? It seems like a lot to put on a newborn child. Um, funny enough, the name Magerfleisch is German and it translates as lean meat or meager meat. It's kind of an interesting and kind of a funny name, but Magerfleisch worked for him for just a few years, for about 2 years. He left the firm in 1958 to launch his own firm, which became known as Magerfleisch and Burnham, was based in Fort Collins. Left him in need of another architect, left Bill Robb in need of another person to work with him in the firm. And in 1959, he hired another World War II veteran and recent college graduate by the name of Bill Brenner. Bill Brenner went on to become very influential in the firm and would spend his entire career working with Bill Robb. The office remained in the Robertson building through 1969. Two other junior architects joined the staff in the early 1960s. Those were Don Drager and Gary Lawrence. Together with Rod and Brenner, they helped to develop plans for numerous projects, as the firm grew in size and reputation. However, in September of 1968, are you guys hearing my dog yipping in the background?
No. No.
Okay, I don't know what she's making little noises there somewhere. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't too loud for you. Um, in September of 1968, Gary Lawrence rented an airplane in Fort Collins, and the men flew to Manhattan, Kansas with their wives to attend the Colorado State University football game against Kansas State. On the return trip, the plane crashed short of the runway in Fort Morgan. They were landing there because of bad weather ahead, and all four of them were unfortunately killed in the crash. And they hit the trees in front of the runway before they came down, as they were coming down. So in this one moment, the firm lost half of its professional staff. And Robb and Bill Brenner were forced to rebuild. I also like to mention that at the time of his death, Don Drager was a member of Fort Collins' recently established Landmark Preservation Commission, and he was actually replaced on the commission by Virgil Magerfleisch. In 1971, Bill Brenner became Robb's partner, was appointed the firm's vice president. The practice's name was changed to Robb and Brenner, and in 1971, they hired two young architects by the names of Frank Vaught and Joe Fry. 4 years later, these two left to start their own firm, which remains in business today as Vaught Fry Ripley Design. They ended up deeply involved with numerous projects in the community, both new construction and the restoration of buildings, including a couple of very prominent ones in Old Town, which are the Linden Hotel and the Northern Hotel, two of which you might recognize if you're familiar with downtown Fort Collins. These two had also sizable impact upon the development of Fort Collins later in the 20th century and into present years, and they really deserve, and their firm deserves, a study of its own at some point. George Braylig, who is on the call with us this evening, joined the firm in 1979, and in 1986 he became a partner. And at the time, the firm was renamed Robb, Brenner, and Braylig, later rebranded as RB&B, and the firm continues to operate today as RB&B. Around 1990, the firm hired Denise Posvek as an interior designer. She just recently left the firm, but I always like to point that out because you see the evolution of starting to hire people with these specialties within an architecture firm on staff. Bill Robb retired from active participation in the firm in 1987, and he passed away in 1999. Eleanor worked intensively with him over many years, basically running his office and handling a lot of the paperwork and scheduling and those sorts of things. She was very instrumental to the operation of the firm. Bill Brenner, you see on the right there, retired in 2003, and sadly, he died exactly a year ago. Um, Following them, the firm was led by George Braley, along with Corky Bradley, who's on the call here this evening as well. And they were joined by Ken Field and Rebecca Spears. Let's see, George and Corky are now retired. Ken's retired as well, now that I think of it. And the principal partners there, David Kress and Rebecca Spears, who you see on the left there. I don't know if they have other partners that have joined them, but I know that they are two of the primary partners there. Okay, so we'll talk about some of the early projects that Bill Robb was involved with. And as a young architect, I think he was about 30, 31 years old when he went out on his own. He, was getting whatever little projects he could manage to land. And of course, those often involved storefront remodels. So here you see a little conceptual drawing. It almost looks like oh, my mind just went blank. Um, Uh, the word's gonna come back into my head, a perspective drawing, that you might see somebody draw in a high school class. But there on the upper right, you see what the storefront ended up looking like. That was taking a much older building and redesigning the storefront, and then you have a remnant of that today in the Trailhead Tavern below. Um, I wanna point out that as we're going along here, you're gonna see a number of buildings that are no longer standing or they've been heavily remodeled. that were designed by Bill Robb, designed by his staff. And again, that's typical of a lot of architecture firms that they have the heartbreak of seeing some of their projects demolished as the longer they stay in business. But there are still some great ones that are still standing today. A number of them very much intact. Um, Small banks, there was a number of small bank projects that were going up. Um, this one here, 1969, Home Federal Savings on the corner of College and Prospect. And there's what it looked like on the left not long after it was built. And you can see what it looks like on the right, what it looks like today, still standing there. Again, very much intact with a little bit of modification to some of the windows there toward the right side. But much of the architecture is still there in that building. Whoops, it's not forwarding here. Let me get to that. Okay, the Rouse Building in downtown Fort Collins. This building actually had an interesting occupation. In other words, who was occupying it? It was originally intended to be commercial shops on the main floor with apartments above. What ended up happening was that as the building was being completed, the U.S. Department of Agriculture came into the owners and said, "Hey, we'd like to take over the entire second floor of the building." And they ended up doing that. So the second floor was, instead of being finished as apartments, was finished as office and laboratory space. The USDA moved 30 of its employees to Fort Collins from the Federal Soil and Water Conservation Office in Beltsville, Maryland. And in this building, they established the agency's Western Soil and Water Management Branch. Again, this helped to make Fort Collins the headquarters for conservation research throughout 17 states because of the USDA's presence in this building. Um, the Robertson Building, which Bill Robb had his firm moved into, I mentioned that earlier. That photo on the bottom was one you saw earlier. This was designed by Bill Robb and his firm. Actually, the building wasn't. It was an older building, I should say. It was a major remodel of both the interior and exterior. It was given an honor award from the Fort Collins Council on the Arts and Humanities for, and I quote, achieving great personality without resorting to gimmicks of an obvious style to accomplish its impact, end quote. This building, again, is still standing, but as you can see on the bottom, it's been extensively remodeled again in recent years. Small office buildings, the hospital service building. This was a nonprofit medical care insurance agency for area residents that covered their hospitalization costs anywhere in the country. Uh, when it was built in 1957, that was a new concept, getting insurance that would cover your hospitalization anywhere in the United States. And that's what hospital service did. And it was hugely successful in gaining customers. So again, Rob's concept in the upper left. By the way, these little drawings came out of the Colorado newspaper. Many of them, they were publishing all these drawings as they were being produced by Rob's firm. There it is on the lower left after it was constructed, and then on the right, what it looks like today. You can see again some loss of facade design and materials, unfortunately. The Farmers Loan Building, 1959. That's the sketch on the left was what it was built as. But again, the facade has been remodeled, as you see on the right, although the building is still standing today. Um, so again, we're seeing these changes that have taken place to a number of his projects, unfortunately. The Randall Shop, built in 1959, a nice mid-century modern design with a cantilevered concrete accordion roof and matching front fixed awning, the large display windows and sandstone wall treatment at the front corners. This was occupied by the Randall Shop, which was a small department store and a beauty shop together. These were operated by the Denver Dry Goods Company. The building has been extensively remodeled in recent years, and they removed all evidence of its original design. Really unfortunate that this was lost. It's on a prominent corner right across the street from the CSU campus at College and Laurel. Steele's Market, 19, what do we have the year on that? I've got it covered up. 1963. a corner of Mountain and Howes in Old Town across the street from St. Joseph's Catholic Church. And unfortunately, that building is now a parking lot. The Colorado newspaper building at College Mountain and Remington. You can see that on the left. This had to be a utilitarian building. The part on the left that has no windows, well, just a few skinny ones there, but was tall and with those blank wall panels. I think they were pebble cast. Um, Housed the printing presses for the Coloradoan newspaper. And you can see some essential form of the building as it exists today, but the part on the left was lowered in height. All right, now we're getting to a major commercial project um, that was undertaken by the firm, the Fort Collins Federal Savings and Loan Association building on Oak and Howes. This was the largest project undertaken by the firm to date. In 1967, the bank announced plans to construct an 11-story tower that was actually an addition to the lower building on the left. So the lower building on the left was constructed earlier, a number of years earlier, as a one-story bank building, and then they decided to expand it with an 11-story tower. Bill Robb and his firm were hired to design the building. It had to be all hands on deck to get this done with this small firm. This building was, of course, constructed with brick, an extensive amount of brick, along with glass and pre-stressed concrete. When it was completed in 1968, it was the tallest building between Denver and Cheyenne, and it instantly became a huge source of pride for Fort Collins. The Fort Collins Federal Savings and Loan Association occupied the two lowest floors in the tower, with 38,000 square feet of rentable space above. Bill Robb himself secured office suites on the 10th floor of the building and moved his firm into the building. It has spectacular views of the city of Fort Collins and the Northern Front Range. Oh, here you go. So there's on the left when it was completed, and on the right what it looks like today. Still very much intact, although in dire need of a lot of repair work or rehabilitation work. Um, Here's some great shots of the interior spaces in that building on the main floor. Again, just a partial list of the many, many other projects that the firm worked on in the 1950s and 1960s. Some of these are gone. Some of them are still standing. Some of them somebody's got to figure out where the heck they were, like the Bartram Car Wash. I don't know where that was. The Keese Building, the Miller Building might be one that is known in downtown, but um, there's a lot of material for future researchers to work on this topic. Just a brief mention of residential projects. The firm did design a lot of houses, but if you take a look at its project list, the plans aren't available for any of the houses that were designed during this period, but they do have an extensive list of completed projects. And on the list, what it says is simply Smith residence or Stevens residence or Galliard or Falk residence. So you have to actually dig through old records in the city directories or wherever to try to figure out, or the old assessor's records, try to figure out where those houses were located. And that's going to be a major project. Maybe a student intern could be put onto that project by the city of Fort Collins at some point to try to figure out where the other houses are. These are just two of the houses that I was able to locate that are still standing today. And actually, they're both in pretty intact condition, except for a minor um, addition to the house on the right that changed it a little bit. School project. This is a major, major um, area of work for the firm and still is today. Once Bill Robb's firm got into designing schools in the mid 1950s, it almost seems like it never stopped. Schools and churches. And we're going to look at a few of those types of buildings quickly here. As I mentioned earlier, Fort Collins was just exploding in size in the 1950s and 60s. And the city's small number of existing schools were just bursting at the seams. They didn't have enough room for all the kids that were being ushered into the schools with the baby boom going on. So new schools were going to have to be constructed. Um, Bill Robb managed to secure contracts with the school district for many of the schools that ended up being developed in the city over the following decades. I would venture to guess that probably 80% of the city's schools were designed by his firm. These were by and large international style buildings with expansive horizontal massing. They represented a real different departure, I should say, from the earlier style of school buildings, which were taller, compact, block-shaped schools. And this heralded a new era of school design for the northern Front Range, at least up in the Fort Collins area. And of course, these types of schools were being built in a lot of cities up and down the Front Range, designed by various architects. The first one he worked on was Putnam Elementary in 1956 in the northwest area of the city. Um, Here you can see again his drawing from the newspaper, what the building looked like when it was completed, and here's what it looks like today. It's been expanded, more than doubled in size, but they retained the major elements of Robb's design. They basically, as they added on to it, they just replicated the original design and added another wing or two. In let's see, 1956, he presented the school board with plans for two more elementary schools, um, Barton Elementary and Moore Elementary. Uh, this district was looking to save both time and cost at that particular moment. So the school board decided they were going to utilize identical plans for both schools, 7 classrooms and a multi-purpose room. And they asked Robb to use one wing of the Putnam Elementary School for the design of these two new schools as the starting point. The year after they were built, the board hired him again to design additional classrooms for these school buildings, along with kitchen facilities for both schools. And then within weeks, they were requesting another two classrooms for each building. This is a clear indication of how fast the number of kids in school in the city, how fast that number was growing, that they could not keep up with the demand for school space. Uh, Bennett and O'Day Elementary Schools. In fact, my daughter, who's on the call, went to O'Day, so it's fun to have her on this call for that reason. And again, here now you're seeing a little different design. I'll go back to the previous ones, and now here they're shifting to a different theme, a different design for the buildings. But again, the long horizontal massing with those awning bands. Each classroom had its own door that opened to the exterior, and then you can see the block-like structure in the middle with the multi-purpose room where the kids ate and had space for school-wide activities. So these were very adaptable buildings, and they look. Those two upper pictures are what they look like today. They really haven't changed much at all. Um, in 1966, Robb presented the district with a concept for some more new elementary schools that would consist of 4 pods or wings that would be connected in the middle with common areas. This allowed for flexible classroom spaces, team teaching, and it would cut down on the cost of construction. The schools designed by the firm using this concept included Irish Elementary, Tavelli, Bowder Elementary, Beatty Elementary, Shepherdson, and Riffenburg. So a number of schools that were all based upon the same design, and you can tell which ones they are because they have those metal hoods over the windows and entryways on the exterior entries to the classrooms. So they all have that similar design feature. He and his firm also designed the Hooter School District's administration building, which was completed in 1969 and still houses the administrative headquarters for the school district today. That's over up in the northwest part of the city. Just a short list of some other school projects that were built in the 1950s and 1960s by the firm, that were designed by the firm. Want to take a look at just some other quick public projects. The bathhouse on the left was built in City Park in Fort Collins next to the swimming pool. It included the bathhouse as well as a concession stand. Unfortunately, it's no longer standing today. The Fort Collins Monument on the right, I get a kick out of this one because nobody in town knows what that thing is. It's a pylon. You can see it on the lower right. It's still standing today on the grounds of what used to be the city's municipal light and power plant right next to the Poudre River on College Avenue north of downtown. That building is now the Colorado State University Energy Laboratory. This project was coordinated by the Chamber of Commerce, Junior Chamber of Commerce, Larimer County Pioneer Association. Now I'm sure you're moving on me. Hey, go on, go on. Let me chase her out of here for a second.
Well, Josh, can we flip it so they can see our group instead of the
Okay. All right, so I'm back. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to put up a monument to the founding of Fort Collins, which occurred in 1864. But this was a strange little situation. Bill Robb designed the stacked sandstone monolith with an adjacent flagpole and plaque. You can see the dedication ceremony going on there. But the groundbreaking ceremony took place on August 20th of 1954, and the monument was completed and dedicated 2 years later in 1956. I don't know what these guys were thinking. They dedicated this on the 92nd anniversary of the city. They were trying to do the 90th. They couldn't wait till the 100th. I don't know what was going on in terms of what they were thinking about this, but it remains standing today, and people drive hundreds and hundreds of cars drive by this every day, and nobody in the city ever seems to know what it is. So I'm trying to educate people as to what this was all about, this unusual monument that's standing there. But it survived. Um, Major project that came up was a new city hall. The existing city hall was built in the 1880s. It included not only the administration, but also the police headquarters and fire headquarters and central fire station, typical of those early municipal buildings. It was in the middle of Old Town. There was no expansion room. So the city decided in 1955 that it was time to build a new municipal building. This turned out to be a remarkable project for Bill Robb and his firm. A 50-member special advisory committee studied the question. They settled on placing it in Washington Park, just west of Old Town. Bill Robb was actually on the committee at the time, and he was also a member of the city's planning and zoning board. He resigned from the board and committee work to accept an award of the contract to design this building. His concept called for a three-winged, three-winged Y-shaped building that would consist of a raised basement and 2 floors above. The curved south facade was referred to in newspaper articles as reminiscent of a boomerang that was constructed with brick and with sandstone wall cladding at either end. And these features, together with the long window bands and horizontal massing, define the building as clearly an international style building. It was viewed by the community at large as very innovative and forward-looking. A project was completed in 1958. And I want to point out that in Bill Robb's file for the project, which was held by his wife, I got to interview her and take a look at his personal files before she passed away. He had a brochure from the Beverly Hilton Hotel, which was built in 1955. Much taller building, but also 3 wings, horizontal, international style building. And I thought that was very interesting because it suggests at least that he was aware of the Beverly Hilton and may have used it as some inspiration for the new municipal building in Fort Collins. So there it is. It was completed in 1958. And this was something that I know he was very proud of, this project. Still in use today by the city of Fort Collins for not as the city hall, but as for offices for at least one of the city departments. I think it's the facilities department that's in there. Moving forward, started working on fire stations. Fort Collins was expanding, as I mentioned, and the city really needed to address the fact that it didn't have fire stations in the right locations. There was only one, and it was located right in the middle of downtown. So getting in and out of there was problematic. So they started, the city hired Bill Robb and his firm to design some new fire stations. These were built in the 1960s. When I first started looking at these, I thought they must be much later buildings. They looked so modern to me. as in more contemporary to our era, but they actually, in fact, were built back in the 1960s, and they're beautiful buildings, still in use as firehouses today. Another public project, the Colorado Game and Fish Department headquarters on the upper left, right across the street from Colorado State University on Prospect. That's what it looked like on the upper left when it was built. And on the lower right, that's what it looks like today. The landscaping has very much grown in, but the building is almost fully intact. Minor changes in the entryway, but other than that, it's still standing as it was built back in 1961. Poudre Valley REA for the electrification headquarters. This was a major remodel of the building in 1963, across the street from Library Park downtown. And there it shows you some of the beautiful work that was done. Complete change to the look of the building that was designed by Bill Robb and his firm on the exterior and interior remodel. Robb's firm was also hired to design a large addition to the Larimer County Courthouse. Um, it re- this the court the original courthouse that stood on the property was built in the 1880s, was demolished in 1957, and a new one was built there. But in 1968, Robb and his firm were engaged to design a large annex, and that built part of the building that's behind these gentlemen standing there. One of whom is Bill Robb on the right, was that annex that was built and designed and built by with the help of Robb's firm. Some higher education projects, in other words, on the CSU campus. This is the Potato Research Greenhouse and Virus Laboratory, which also became the Weed Research Laboratory. I can't help myself, but I always have to say that I thought the entire CSU campus is a weed research laboratory. I'm glad you guys didn't find that to be too stupid. Okay. This was another really nice characteristic building from the firm's style of work on the CSU campus. You see another one here, and you can see some similarities. These are concrete block buildings, and obviously brickwork in there as well. But the window surrounds are interesting on these buildings. See the way they've placed those. This building here, Central Receiving, was put up in 1966, still in use today, and this housed the post office for the campus, and anything that was shipped in or out of the campus came through this building because it was located right next to the railroad tracks that run through the campus, and there's actually a rail siding that serves this building. Um, he did some fraternity work, and I'd like to see if we can find out more of the fraternity sorority houses that he worked on. But this was one that's still standing on the south end of the campus, the Acacia Farmhouse Fraternity, built in 1964. Not a very lovely building, but you can see from the drawing on the left and the way it looks today that it still expresses most of the features that were designed for the building. These are some of those other projects that were done on and around the CSU campus. And again, somebody's going to have to down the road figure out where these fraternities were and whether any of them are still standing, as well as where the biophysical building is on campus or was, because they've often changed the names. Churches. I hope. Do we still have a little time left? I hope.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I want to take a look at church projects because there are some beautiful churches that were designed by Bill Robb and his firm. So the American Baptist Church, which stands north of the campus on Shield Street, um, was completed in 1956. The building still retains very little of its exterior architecture. If you see those four tall windows and an entryway on the far left of the building, you can still see those along College Avenue. But the rest of the building has been so extensively modified on the exterior that it's almost unrecognizable today. I don't know. I haven't managed to get inside this building yet to see if that sanctuary looks like that or it's been altered. I do want to mention a couple of regional projects in northern Colorado. Bill Robb and his firm designed the Poudre Canyon Chapel, which is up obviously in the Poudre Canyon, was built between 1955 and 58. The reason it took a few years to build it is that it was built by hand by the members of the congregation up there. They actually collected the rocks, the rubble stones themselves, and put the building up themselves, and it took a few years to get the project completed, but it was all based upon design provided by Bill Robb. Another project of his was the chapel in the Pines, which still stands at Red Feather Lakes, northwest of Fort Collins. Was completed in 1963 and is still in use today by the Red Feather Lakes community. The Emmanuel Southern Baptist Church on Mulberry Street, uh, designed in 1958 and expanded in 1965 with an education wing that was also designed by Robb's firm. And as you can see from the drawing on the left, the picture today on the right, it looks very much unchanged. This is a pretty little building, the Crestmore Church of God, which is actually tucked into a neighborhood south of Fort Collins City Park. I didn't even know it was there. You have to actually drive into the neighborhood till you come across it. It's not on a major street, just surrounded by houses. It's a small church that was designed in 56, but the construction wasn't completed until 1960. From the 1990s until recent years during the pandemic, this was the home of the Abyssinian Christian Church, which was Fort Collins' only African American congregation. They folded or moved sometime during the pandemic, and I haven't figured out where they have gone to, if they're even still in existence anymore. But because of that association as well, it's a really important church here in the community. St. Joseph's Catholic Church, which is in Old Town, was completed in 1901. And by the late 1950s, along with the growth in the community's population, the building was no longer adequate to serve the Catholic population in town. So the Gothic Revival building needed to be expanded. Bill Robb's firm was engaged in 1959 to develop that expansion as well as a major remodel of the interior. The sanctuary was enlarged, and the original main entrance in the southeast bell tower, which you see there, was closed. So in other words, the entry was into the bell tower, and it was replaced by three new Gothic arched doorways along the south wall. So on the left, facing Mountain Avenue. If you see that portico with the three openings, Gothic arched openings, that was an addition from the 1950s, but very sensitively done, so that it really blends with the building well. Um, the entire project was completed in 1960, and then 5 years later, Robb was invited back to provide the church with plans for a new school gymnasium. This property occupies much of the block and includes um, St. Joseph's School, and housing for the sisters that used to reside on the property and teach at the school as well. Um, the interior was also remodeled, and this is a picture of the sanctuary after the remodel was completed in the 1950s. Oh, they also excavated a full basement under the building to add an auditorium, kitchen, and a furnace room. This is one of the most exciting projects I think that Bill Robb and his firm worked on. The First Methodist Church on Stover Street. It's again tucked into a neighborhood east of the campus, about a half mile east of campus, and it it really reminds me of Temple Emmanuel in Denver. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that building in Hilltop. They have such a similar folded plate roof look to them. But what a gorgeous building with the sanctuary on the right, the bell tower, unusual triangular bell tower, and then the chapel is on the left in that picture that you see there. The drawing on the left shows what the concept was, and as you can see, it was very much built to match that concept. Um, I have no doubt that this building is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, and they're on my list of people to start talking to about getting that listing done. I'd love to write their nomination for that property. So there's what it looks like today. Just still a gorgeous building. And here's the interior. This is one of the most beautiful interiors that I've ever walked into in the city of Fort Collins. I do want to show you another one that's pretty darn nice, which is St. Luke's Episcopal Church. Um, that largely, from what I understand, was designed by Robb and Bill Brenner, that they collaborated on the project. Um, and Corky and George can correct me on that if I'm wrong, but the church was founded in 1882 downtown. But by the post World War II era, they'd outgrown the building. It was aging, it was cramped, and parking had become a real problem for the congregation. So Robb's firm was engaged to design a new building on a 3.5 acre site in the Indian Hills neighborhood, which is also east of the campus as you're approaching Poudre Valley Hospital and LeMay Avenue. Um, the plans called for an expansive contemporary style building. 420 seat sanctuary would be formed by a large flattened A-frame with the roof sloped upward above the chancel like the prow of a ship. The interior would feature exposed laminated beams and brickwork, and the exterior walls were to be clad in wood shake shingles. Um, Also planned for the site were 8 classrooms, meeting and office space, a kitchen and a library, and a chapel that could seat 60 people. I believe that's the part that you see in the drawing on the upper right, and that part was never built. The chapel was never built. That particular feature, the chapel ended up being placed elsewhere in the building, and I'll show you what those look like. So on the left, you see the interior of the sanctuary, just another really beautiful space, very contemporary looking. And on the lower right is the chapel that they did end up putting in, and all the furnishings in that chapel, a number of them came out of a mansion that was here in Fort Collins for many years that has been torn down. The University Lutheran Chapel, which people often say, "Hey, it looks like a hat," which is right next to the campus, completed in 1968. And that is still in use today. Here's the interior. You can see that, unfortunately, I was really disappointed to see that they removed this was done just recently. They removed all the wall paneling and the arc area there and the sanctuary in the round, which did have movable seating, but they stripped those things away. But you can still that's the same exact view. You can still see the ceiling structure and the roof structure inside there, the structural supports for the building. This is another one of their beautiful projects built in 1969, John the 23rd Catholic Center, uh, across Shields, west of campus. Um, During the 1960s, there were approximately 2,200 Catholic students on campus, along with faculty and staff. And they kept moving to different locations every year for their gatherings. And in early 1969, the Catholic Archdiocese of Denver announced that it was planning to build a permanent home for the Catholic Center in Fort Collins. The diocese acquired land just west of the campus and engaged Bill Robb to design plans for the building. His design included a sanctuary with an intricate beam ceiling. I want to show that's on the right. Intricate beam ceiling, a long entry foyer, which you see on the left with clear story bands and exposed roof beams, an office and library lounge and living quarters for the priests and parish secretary. The part of the building on the right was it housed the living quarters. So construction of the building was completed in the fall of 1969, and it's still in use today. Just a beautiful, beautiful building that the firm takes credit for and deserves to. Again, just another list of um, projects and church projects that are scattered around and that need to be located to see if any of them are still standing.
Ron, at this time and in the time frames you've been showing for all these projects, the dates are obviously overlapping. So, how big was their firm at this time that they were busy with this many projects in this kind of range?
It was still a relatively small firm. I think that maybe we can, when I get done speaking, we can ask George and Corky
Yeah.
if they can tell us. They might have some sense of how many people were there, but I don't think it was more than 10 people. That's what I'm guessing, but they were prolific in what they were producing, just amazing. I don't know how they did it, honestly. One multifamily residential project I want to mention, Indian Meadows. Although we'll look at some other apartments, but this was um, this development went up at a time when the concept of um, a PUD, planned unit development, was something new, and it was developed by the Rhodes Real Estate Agency here in Fort Collins. They purchased a 3-acre site on what was then the south end of town, just north of Spring Creek and south of Prospect. Was known as Meadows West. It was reportedly the first PUD in the city of Fort Collins. The design called for 34 semi-detached residential units lining a shared interior street, along with common landscape grounds that provided a clubhouse and swimming pool. And every unit was provided with an attached carport and a private patio. So there's when it was finished on the left, and here's what it looks like today. That's just one of a number of buildings that are there. And you can see, the use of board and batten siding, the gabled roofs, um, the bands and pairs of casement windows, the patios enclosed with vertical wood fencing. Um, the interiors included air conditioning and shag carpeting, which people were thrilled to find out about. And they put color television antennas that were built into the buildings, so into the attic, so that they wouldn't be unsightly sticking up on the rooftops. Um, in 1973, the complex shifted from rental units to condominiums, so they were sold off. But the entire complex is standing today and appears to be largely unaltered. Jumping back to schools, um, uh, and just a few more schools from the 1970s and that era. Um, let's see. A special advisory commission was put together in the late 60s to complete a study of the need for new facilities over the following decade, as the city was continuing to expanding both size and population. And the commission came back with a determination that with the rate of growth that was going on, the district would have to build one new elementary school every year from 1971 to 1977. Um, I'm sure they were just floored when the school board members heard that report. Um, they also needed to come up with additional junior high and high school space along the way. So the school district responded by launching an aggressive program to acquire parcels of land. Uh, they purchased a number, and they ended up doing some takings in the process when people were trying to, get the highest prices they could off the pieces of land that were needed within developing subdivisions. So Beatty Elementary School launched them back into the design of schools in 1971. The building was completed in 1972. And the plans ended up also being used for Bowder, Irish, Riffenberg, and Tavelli, provided additional office space, a more open design, and better placement of the kindergarten room. It also, interestingly, included a special room for teaching children who were deaf. This was the first time that was put into the district. The room was outfitted with a sound system and a one-way window so that the parents could actually stand outside the room and observe the teaching techniques that were being used so they could replicate those at home and support those at home. Really an interesting idea. Another concept um, that Robb and Brenner came up with um, was I might be lost with my notes here. Let's see, we're on Laurel. Yeah, Laurel Elementary School. What they came up with here was the district was concerned about the growth and possible deflation of the number of students and the need to add classrooms or take away classrooms in the coming decades. And so Robb and Brenner came up with a concept that used modular buildings. So, in other words, if you look at um, obviously you have a model on the left, and the person's hand in the model is holding a modular classroom. So what they ended up doing was building vertical walls and then lowering the classrooms into the space between the vertical walls. Okay. And that way you could add more vertical walls and drop more modulars as you needed them, or the opposite, remove them if the student population declined. And here you see today, Juan Fulan Elementary School was designed with that plan, and it's still standing unchanged today. There were several schools that were built like this, one in Wellington, one in LaPorte, northwest of Fort Collins, one in Stove Prairie, which is up in the mountains above Fort Collins, and also the Laurel Elementary School and LaPorte Avenue Elementary School in town. There were others as well. The concept was unique enough that people were coming to Fort Collins from school districts throughout Colorado to take a look at this idea and see if they might be able to apply it in their communities. I don't know if that was applied elsewhere, but it's an interesting question mark as to whether it was. One other project that was completed by Robb and Brenner during the 1970s, worthy of note, is the design for the new 7,100 seat high school stadium known as Ray French Field. Was completed in 74 and is still in use today. It sits adjacent to Rocky Mountain High School, um, which was a later building, but not too much later. But that field is very much in use today for all the high school football activities in the area and track and field as well. I'm going to run through just a few others as we start approaching the end of my talk. The firm also returned to fire station design when they ended up designing fire station number 1. Why the other two I showed you earlier were stations 2 and 3? Why was this one fire station 1? Because it replaced the fire station that was in Old Town, downtown, the original fire station. This is on Mulberry Street, about half a mile south of Old Town. And it was designed to hold not only this fire station, but also the fire department headquarters. And the second floor of the building was put on for the bunkhouse for the firefighters. And the building was designed in this style because the neighbors were objecting to the presence of a fire station in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And so Robb and Brenner designed it to look more residential to fit into the neighborhood. The headquarters is no longer there in the building today, but it's still in use as fire station number 1. Um, by the 70s, the city had outgrown its municipal hall, which you see on the right there, the three-winged building, and they were in dire need of a new building, and a decision was made to place it in on the same property, which was a former city park called Washington Park, just to the left and above or the northwest of the existing Bill Robb designed municipal hall. So in 1977, City Council approved a $2 million plan to construct the new municipal building. Robb and Brenner presented a drawing, which you see here, that showed the municipal complex as it was appear once the new building was constructed. It was a 2-story, 26,000 square foot brick building with parking around it. And then the north half of the site would be left as a city park, but would be kept available in case additional municipal buildings would need to be constructed in the future. It took some time for the project to be awarded, but groundbreaking took place in the spring of 1977 with Bill Robb as one of the speakers. The project was completed in 78, and the building remains in use today as City Hall. There's some more drawings from that project. And here's what it looks like today. That's still the City Hall with the council chambers on the right, and the city manager's office and mayor's office on the left, and finance and other departments in the building. Okay, just a couple of other quick ones, and we are rapidly moving to the end of my presentation. I just want to mention the Scotch Pines apartments and commercial development, which are located it would be the southeast part of town as it was developing. This project involved Robb and Brenner, started in 1972 when they were engaged by developer Gene Mitchell to come up with a design for 2 phases of apartments, Scotch Pines East and Scotch Pines West, in the southeast part of the city. These were apartments and townhomes, 2-story residential buildings, expansive landscape grounds, wood frame construction, board and batten siding. and small patios and balconies. The residents were also provided with a central clubhouse and a swimming pool. So this was really hailed as a great design and modern living right there for people who needed to rent a townhouse or apartment in Fort Collins. Um, Couple other quick apartments. This is west of campus where the students are all living along the West Elizabeth corridor. The firm designed the wood box condos. Actually, they were apartments originally. Now they've become condominiums. Um, the apartments, which are still in use today, brick buildings. And then jumping back to Scotch Pines, I should have put that together with the apartments, I guess, that were there. This has been a tremendously successful development right next to the Scotch Pines apartments. Robb and Brenner designed the Scotch Pines Village Shops. It's a commercial complex on the corner of Drake and LeMay, constructed in the late 1970s. Uh, and it's always had a supermarket located there, along with multiple small retail stores and offices. It's made up of three long buildings that were built of variegated brick with low pitched roofs and deep walkways that are sheltered by overhanging eaves. The development also included landscaping with outdoor seating areas and a very large central parking lot. Remains in use today with no major alterations, and it's really recognized as a very successful mixed use development, and it attracts a lot of people on a daily basis who go shopping there. Steele's Market, another just commercial, as the city was moving to the south along the College Avenue corridor. This was directly west of the Foothill Shopping Mall, and was used for many years as a grocery store. And additional projects from the 1970s. Another successful project, the Stewart Professional Park. Um, a lot of really successful firms occupying office space in these buildings. Um, this church is just a beautiful building built in 1989. That's, if I remember correctly, 2 years after Bill Robb retired from the firm, but a beautiful example of the firm's work from the late 1980s. And this is the end of my talk. I do want to just say a brief statement about the nature of Bill Robb's legacy. In 1978, the Triangle Review newspaper in Fort Collins published an article about Bill Robb and his impact upon Fort Collins. And as when I say his impact, it also speaks to the firm because there were so many people that worked with him, including two of whom who are on our call this evening. Um, the article is titled "Fort Collins Architect Changed the Face of the Whole City." Again, this came out in 1978. It discussed the widespread impact of Robb's design work upon the city's development as a whole since the 1950s. Interviewed in his 10th floor office in the Fort Collins Saving and Loan Tower, a building he designed, Robb told the reporter, "We've done most of our work in this area. We feel when you are close to your work, you can form a close relationship with your client and provide better service. It's nice to know the people you work with and take the project through from conception to completion." His architectural practice started in the early post World War II years and grew along with the city in a relationship that proved to be symbiotic. "When I first came here," he said, "there wasn't a lot of building going on, and the university was only half as big as it is now. The town's growth was steady and slow. The town became a city. Construction boomed." The article concluded that Robb had left his mark on the entire community. A decade later, the Colorado newspaper published a lengthier article about Robb at the time of his retirement. Reflecting on the length of his career, he commented, "You can tell you've been around a while when you start remodeling your own buildings." The article described the impact he had upon the developed landscape and skyline of Fort Collins, commenting that anyone who has lived in Fort Collins has visited buildings that were designed by Bill Robb. Builder David Neenan of the Neenan Company likens Robb to the master builders of old, the people who could design, engineer, and build their own buildings. Neenan's point was that Robb's background and experience were extensive. Reflecting upon his career, Robb summed it up by stating, "We've loved this community. We've raised our family here. We've had a wonderful relations with our clients." Bill Robb died in 1999 and remained involved with his beloved community to the end. And as I said earlier, it's impossible to live, work, study, or play in Fort Collins without passing or entering his buildings on a daily basis. Despite this loss of so many of his projects, which I showed you, many others still stand. His creativity, together with that of his partners and employees, still manifests itself in the form of brick, stone, wood, metal, glass, everywhere we go. His handiwork is the stage upon which we live our lives and a reflection of the growth and development of the city of Fort Collins over the past 7 decades. Thank you very much, and I be happy to entertain any questions or see if George or Corky could answer any.
That was an amazing program, Ron. I mean, when's the book come out?
There really should be one. Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. I should ask if did George or Corky, if you're there, do you have anything to add?
Corky says that he's without mic,
Oh, okay.
so he'll have to work via chat.
Yeah.
Typist.
I'm very happy to see Corky and George on this call. It makes me very happy to have them here with us because they were so instrumental in the firm over so many years.
Well, I'm just impressed with how much work was coming out of the office. Yeah, we need to know how big the office.
Absolutely. Somebody needs to answer that for us. Unfortunately, the people who were involved with the firm back in the 50s, 60s, 70s are mostly gone. George, trying to remember, George, when did you join the firm? I've got it back here and I mentioned it and I don't have it at the tip of my tongue right now. Hmm. George's been around long enough. He may be able to tell us.
Or just muted.
Yeah, you're muted, George, if you do want to say anything. Maybe I put him to sleep. I don't know.
I'm curious who his main like architectural influences were, if you know that.
Did you ask about what his architectural influences were? It's a great question. One of the things I know about him that I learned along the way was that he was a very practical architect. He wasn't an architect who seemed to be a real dreamer in terms of, coming up with concepts that were pushing the envelope all the time. He really intended to build buildings that were useful for the community. And I say that then reflecting back to what were his influences. I don't know what they were. It just seems that whatever they were spoke to the utility of buildings um, without having to push the envelope all the time. There were some beautiful examples of some of those churches that I showed you. When he got into the folded plate roof on First United Methodist and the unusual flattened A-frame for St. Luke's, and that may have reflected more the influence of Bill Brenner. I don't know. Unfortunately, they're no longer here with us to tell us about where their influences came from. And Bill Brenner, by the time I met him, had declined so much that he passed away a week after I met him and was able to sit down with him for the first time.
I did love the connection with the Beverly Hotel that you mentioned, because when you put that picture up there, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's the satellite in Colorado Springs."
Yes, it is. You caught
It's
that.
it's really fun to see exactly like you said, we don't always know exactly where the influences came from, but other architects that we focused on, we see very similar things. Clearly they're seeing what other architects are doing across the country. They're familiar with Bauhaus, with the international style, like just seeing that these influences are making their way to Colorado somehow, and these guys are really embracing them in their own kind of Colorado fashions.
Right.
Yeah.
Early. Yeah, and and so we're looking at modern design, even modernist design with Bill Robb's firm. But um, as I mentioned earlier, this is not Charles Hartling or Papa Christou. Those types of more expressionist, uh, um, that end of architecture. That sphere of architecture. His designs were very practical, and it makes sense also to me in a community like Fort Collins. Fort Collins during the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. This was not like Aspen. It was not like Boulder. Um, it wasn't even like Denver in a way. It was an agricultural community that had a big agricultural based university where they were studying agriculture and mechanical arts. It was a regional agricultural hub, a hub of county government. And so I don't know what those kinds of designs would have, if he was pushing the envelope, coming up with designs that were the kinds of things you would have seen in a place like Aspen or Boulder. I don't know how the community would have responded to those at that time, whether they would have thought they were just too out there. So he was working, in other words, in a more conservative milieu, a conservative environment, I think, and he reflected that in the nature of his work much of the time.
It is interesting because as you were going through the variety of work in his portfolio, it actually reminded me of Tom Nixon based out of Boulder at the same time. So they're contemporaries. They're working on very similar project types. Like literally, they're checking all the same boxes.
Yeah.
And so it just makes me curious. They're practicing at the exact same time. I'm sure they were competing against each other sometimes.
Mhm.
But it was really interesting to see again, like going back to influences and what trends were. Like even with the schools, you had mentioned the adaptability of school design. And that's something that Nixon and his other contemporaries touched on of the pinwheel and like flexible classrooms. So
Right.
it's fun to see in his school designs, like they were bringing in the Neomancer roofs, they were bringing in the pinwheel. Like again, these regional architects trying out these new ideas, and they're all kind of trying it, but again, it's all kind of nuanced and a little different flavor per firm.
And you're right, and you have to think that they were looking at each other's work.
Yeah.
And studying each other's work and paying attention. I've been working on a big project in Colorado Springs right now, writing a survey plan for the city. So I've spent an entire year now touring the city of Colorado Springs uh, to take a look at the extent of what they have there in the way of historic buildings. And you look at the elementary schools throughout Colorado Springs that were built in the 60s, 70s, and they look a lot like the buildings that Bill Robb was designing in Fort Collins during those same years. And so some of them may have been in communication with each other, but you're right, they were competing with each other for bids. They were probably traveling back and forth between the cities to look at other projects or on vacation or whatever they were doing. And stopping and taking a look at a new elementary school that went up in Colorado Springs and, what could I do with that in Fort Collins? Taking inspiration from one another.
Fort Collins. However, Jim Hunter from Boulder did most of the buildings for CSU,
Exactly.
and Lamar Kelsey from Colorado Springs did did an athletic facility there.
Right. So Hunter was very influential here with the campus.
Hunter had a lot of buildings up there.
He did. And, I think about like the municipal building in Boulder that you mentioned earlier, Bree. That's a building that Bill Robb could have designed.
Yeah.
So there were some similarities there as well. And Hunter's work was not too dissimilar from what Bill Robb was doing as well.
Well, and I imagine so a lot of those schools look like the Littleton schools that Sternberg designed, in particular the one that you showed that had the pods
Yeah.
went around in the quadrants. Sternberg, I think, did 3 of those schools, and I want to say only one is still remaining that where they did the pods for the community pods. And so I'd be curious which one came first. I'd almost say it might have been Sternberg's because I want to say his was early 50s. And then you had Wheeler and Lewis who did over 300 school projects in Denver and surrounding and actually some of the mountains and things too. So I'd be curious if they had an influence because they're very similar. They're all that international style, very simple, low, elegant buildings, and Sternberg and Wheeler and Lewis and those all like they're so similar in so many ways that if you didn't know at a glance, you could almost call them any of each other's. And I would almost say that it had to have been Sternberg that was the first one who started that, and then everybody else kind of fell into it, but I could be wrong. But he was doing it. I think Sternberg might have done the first elementary school in Littleton in 50, in like that.
Mm-hmm. So, from what I've seen over the years, the design of these buildings was an outgrowth of the evolution of educational philosophy and practice.
Yeah.
Right. And so they weren't designing, the architects weren't designing buildings and saying, just here, fit your program into this building. It was the opposite. And so the evolution of educational philosophy and practice emerged from World War II into the post-World War II years and started shaping the development of new schools. We want to have a multi-purpose room. We want classrooms where we can open a movable wall and engage two classrooms together at the same time. And we want pods so that classrooms can participate together at moments. Those pod classrooms, I remember seeing those myself in the 70s when I traveled to California, when I traveled up to Toronto, Canada. I remember going and spending a day in a school up there when I was a teenager that was built with pods, and I had never seen anything like that before in high school. And I remember being blown away by the whole concept. So, again, the function resulted in the form, and was an outgrowth of that.
Ron, do you know if any of their work was published nationally?
I don't. Good question. I don't know. I haven't come across anything.
Did they ever design buildings outside of Fort Collins?
Yeah, there are some buildings that are on their project list from the earlier years that were designed like out onto the Eastern Plains. I know there was a church that he designed in, I forget if it was Brush or Fort Morgan, something like that. So there were some churches that were, sorry, not churches, but buildings that were designed that were kind of more regional. The Loveland Municipal Building in downtown Loveland was designed by Robb's firm. It's still in use today, housing the planning department and all. Beautiful building. And I'm curious to see what other buildings in Loveland that the firm designed, because there have to be some since Loveland is so close. As time went on, as you got into the 90s and through the present, it seems that the firm's regional scope just blew up. And I think they do a lot more work way beyond northern Colorado and even beyond Colorado as a state. And they're still doing a lot of schoolwork. I didn't have time to include it, but there's some absolutely gorgeous schools they designed here in Fort Collins that are very large and that were built in more recent decades, junior highs and high schools. So they're still at it today. I'm guessing they have about 20 people in the office, 24 people. They're still located in downtown Fort Collins.
Gorky said they had a lot. I don't know if you saw that note, Ron, that he said that they had a lot of magazines and awards later after Bill and Bill. So hopefully you could maybe
Yeah.
find them at some point or get together with Corky and see if they're around.
You bet. Yeah, I'm looking at his notes in the chat. You bet.
I see Adam.
South.
Adam's working on this board.
Like we know.
Adam. So, Ron, a couple slides back, you showed some residential looking office buildings.
Yes.
And they look awful similar to a group of buildings that you and I, Adam, went and looked at. They darn near look like the same product at what, 88th and 88th or thereabouts.
Oh, in Denver?
Yes.
I think it's like Sheridan and the Denver Boulder Turnpike right there at the in the northeast corner.
Yeah, that project that Robb and Brenner designed here in Fort Collins is just south of the hospital, about maybe a third of a mile, and it's surrounded by residential neighborhoods. And so they clearly designed those buildings to soften the look and make them fit beautifully into the residential neighborhoods that they are um, set within. And they have just a gorgeous style. And it's not just the style, but the feel of those buildings. When you go into the interiors, the office spaces are just so nicely designed. They have little balconettes on them, and it has a residential feel to it. There's no question about it. The look and feel of that complex. It's always been occupied by a lot of like financial firms and investment companies, financial advisors, and consulting firms and that sort of thing. So it's a very popular project as far as Fort Collins and small businesses being located there. Anything else? Well, if not, thank you all very much. I really appreciate your giving me the opportunity to speak with you this evening.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I have to second Josh. That was an excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'll give the book idea a thought.
Absolutely should.
I
Yeah.
am curious. You mentioned you're working on a project with Colorado Springs. What else do you have on your, what else are you working on? What else do you have coming up?
Oh my gosh. I have to look around me on my desk. I'm doing several landmark nominations. One on a utopian community west of Loveland in the foothills that was started in 1945, is still around today, and they were the first agricultural farm in Colorado. I didn't say agriculture, the first organic farm in the state of Colorado, which is a pretty neat thing to come across. I'm doing a study of the alleyway buildings in Crested Butte, which, is an old coal mining town. And so the alleyways are just lined by hundreds of old buildings that date back to the 1880s. So I'm doing a survey of those for Crested Butte. I've got several projects going on in Idaho and Utah. One is a World War II Air Force base. Have any of you been to Wendover? Wendover, Utah. That's the World War II Air Force base where they were training the bomber crews. Many of the bombers, there were a few of those types of bases across the United States, but they were training them for bombardier practice, for navigation and dropping bombs, because of it's right next to the Bonneville salt flats and the salt desert out there. And that's also where the Enola Gay and Boxcar were based, as they were training to drop the atomic bombs on Japan. It was a top secret program going on across the far side of the base out in the salt flats. And I've written a National Register nomination for that site. I could list another dozen projects I'm deep in the middle of, but those are a few of them anyway.
That's awesome. Those sound exciting.
Yeah. It's a good variety of projects.
That's good.
And as my daughter will tell you, I work too much. Yeah. And I haven't read a single book that you see on these bookshelves. They're just there to make me look smart.
Well, do we have any other announcements, anything like that? Can I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Good.